Welcome, ladies and gentlemen, to season 4 of Cuz You Don't Know Football. That's right, we are your football knowledge hub. So I'm very excited to get back to you, man. Season 3 was amazing. We got to new heights. We had a lot of new followers and a lot of new fans. But now we're going to move on to season 4 because we made a lot of additions. If you're looking at even what you're looking at now, of course, we got new film equipment. We invested in that. We got the mic right here. We're really excited about what's going on now. Okay, we're actually official now. So based off of last year, you saw what happened last year. You saw we brought you through the whole year. So now we're starting a new league year. So the league year starts with free agency and going into the draft. So we're going to kind of bridge that episode or bridge that for the next couple episodes. Okay. So for this one, we're going to bring on my man and your man, Mooch. We're bringing him in. Okay. Let's see how this works out. See, I told you we off to a better start this year. I told you, like, this year's gonna be amazing, man. We got video, we got audio, we in there, baby. So this is very always special for me, this being the season premiere of season 4 of Cuz You Don't Know Football, man. So I had to bring in the big guns, you know. So I started telling them the story of what the conversation we had. I was trying to tell him, I told Mooch, I said, listen, Mo, I need you to come on the season premiere. It's gonna be big. It's gonna be live, and we're gonna talk about the AFC South and NFC South. And he said, "Why would you give me such bad topics to talk about?" I said, "Are you kidding me? This is what I need you for." See, this is where I could say, this is where I could give you credit right here, okay? Because it ain't too many people that can bring it. See, I have to be here through all of this. It ain't too many people that I can bring on. I can say, who could talk about the NFC South and AFC South and make it sound dope? And I said, I know exactly who's going to do this. So, we got you.
I think your ability to sell water to a whale is commendable. You do a very good job of salesmanship. So that's why I'm here.
Listen, I learned it all from you, so I don't know what you're talking about. So, all right. So as I was just telling everybody, we got through last year and we kind of try to unravel the whole season little by little, take little chunks out of it so that we can build on, you know what I mean, everything, the excitement, which is the regular season. So now we're starting from free agency just happened. So we're going to talk about free agency. Let's talk about these teams. Let's talk about how you feel about these teams, and let's talk about what they still need going into the new season. You know what I mean? So it's going to be real exciting. If you've noticed new stuff, I don't know if you're looking at this and you could tell, but we invested this off season into camera work and this lovely mic that you see right here.
That is a nice microphone. I must admit.
Look at it, man. This is we are official. We're official now. Okay, we're real.
Make sure whoever they are is sponsoring this podcast.
They ain't paying us yet. Listen. You lucky that they got on their hair at all because they ain't pay us yet, but they will be.
Well, soon to come.
Soon to come. Okay, so you tell me where you want to start. Let's start with where you want to start. You want to take. We could take the NFC side of it. We could take the AFC. We could take the good teams. We could take the bad teams. You tell me how you want to work.
Let's just start with the NFC South. How about that?
Let's just start with who's the dumpster fire of last year, the Carolina Panthers. So Carolina last year finished at, they were 2-15. Okay, they needed a lot of work this season, and yeah, I'm just curious to see, what do you think? What do you think about them? What do you think about the moves that they made? What do you think that they like in terms of free agency? We're gonna get into the draft, but free agency, what do you think about the moves that they made?
I mean, they did some work to improve the sort of the floor of the team. I don't think they signed anybody at the elite end of free agency, but they signed Robert Hunt. He's a guard. I think they signed him top of the league money for the position. I think that was a decision based on potential in large part. I don't think he's demonstrated to be that good, but from what I understand, he's a very good offensive guard. So they improved the offensive line there. They signed I think A'Shawn Robinson, who's sort of a not a journeyman, but just more like a he can be like your third defensive tackle or your fourth defensive end kind of guy. So you know, improving the floor, getting veteran players in. I think they do. I think someone like Ashawn Robinson will do that. And I think recently they signed Jadeveon Clowney, who again is a floor raiser, not an elite defensive end, but someone who is a professional and can come in and improve things. So, you know, they didn't do much on the offensive side in order to demonstrate or help to demonstrate growth for the new quarterback who struggled a lot last year. So maybe that's coming in the draft. But they did a good amount to raise the floor on the team through free agency.
Okay, so just let you know, just as you was talking, I gave a little share on what was going on through free agency, so that they could see what the Carolina Panthers did during that period of time. Yeah, so Carolina, they started off with me pretty bad when they released Brian Burns, or when they didn't re-sign Brian Burns and he got to the Giants. I thought that was a pretty big hole. Actually, before I even go for a question, what do you think about Brian Burns in terms of him being a pass rusher, a legit player, things of that nature? What do you feel?
I mean, yeah, I think he's a very good defensive end. I don't know that he's an elite defensive end. I think, you know, was it last season or 2 seasons ago, they had an opportunity, at least if you listen to the rumors, they had an opportunity to trade him to the Rams for 2 first-round picks, which I thought was ridiculous on the Rams' part. I don't think he's worth 2 first-round picks. I think he was traded this time probably for around what his value was on the trade market, given that the Giants ultimately have to pay him at top of the league or somewhere near the top of the league contract for his position. I think he's very good. I don't think his timeline fits the current team's timeline at all. So it's good for them to get something for him now and just move on.
Okay, so the reason I asked that is because I really feel like that was a pretty big loss for Carolina. I think, all right, so you have the top of the league pass rushers. You have Myles Garrett, TJ Watt, Max Crosby,
Bosa, San Francisco.
Yes, Nick Bosa. And after that, I think if you're not going to have those guys, then I think there's not really a play for you getting a legitimate pass rusher. So even I think Brian Burns, actually his contract for him worked out really well, because who else you going to get? You know what I mean? But I think he fits a hole. I think he is actually a pretty good defensive end. So I do think for a 2-15 team that's taking a step back first. Now, they did get Deontay Johnson, just like you said. They got Jadeveon Clowney, but like Jadeveon Clowney, it's annoying Jadeveon Clowney. Even when I talk to Ravens fans about Jadeveon Clowney, they're like, everybody wants to love Jadeveon Clowney, but nobody's re-signing him. You know, they're like, oh, he had 8 sacks last year. Yeah, and that's why you let him go. It's a reason. It was in your system that you could produce something like that. He's not a guy that you could say, I can rely on this pressure. And it showed even in the AFC Championship game. He was nothing. I mean, when it came down to the Chiefs and stuff like that.
Yeah, I mean, I think a lot of the Jadeveon Clowney conversation boils down to what the expectations were of him coming out of college, even. He had the one big hit against Michigan in that bowl game, and everyone thought that he was going to be the greatest defensive end of all time. When if you even looked at his production in college, he was not a great rush defensive end. He was not someone who got a lot of sacks. He was an incredible athlete at the position, but he was more of a solid, set the edge defensive end who will, you know, who's really good against the run. Will get to the quarterback at times, but is more, like I've said, like a floor raising defensive end, someone who solidifies your defense so that you're not giving up a lot on the run as your other guys are getting to the quarterback. So no, he's not a Brian Burns type, because Brian Burns is more of a get to the quarterback, get a lot of sacks type player. And you know, I do think Brian Burns is a really good player and deserving of the contract that he got from the Giants. I just don't think he would, like, you know, they were 2-15 with him, you know, so like what is he ultimately bringing to the table from a wins perspective? I understand what he brings from a production perspective in terms of sacks, but like, you know, what is that? He gets a lot of sacks and they're 2-15. So like, that's a player that, to me, you move on, especially given how young they're trying to get with their quarterback and all of that.
So like, for instance, for like my team, the Colts, like I absolutely was like, I would want Brian Burns. Like, can we try to get Brian Burns? And when he just went to the Giants and he was gone. So but he's somebody like that for me. Let's shift gears to a team that I'm sure you want to rub in my face, the New Orleans Saints. I had a lot to say about them, and I had a lot to say about Derek Carr last year. And it looked bad. It was one of the things I had to come on here and I had to tell the world about how wrong I was about how Derek Carr was going to play, how good the Saints were going to be, and yeah, still don't feel good about that. So so tell me what it is that we can look forward to in terms of the Saints.
But the Saints have broken a lot of hearts over the years, primarily because they continue to build their team in a way that's different from everyone else, and it just hasn't been ultimately that successful. They've continued to push money decisions into the future, so to speak. Just re-sign players or reconstruct contracts, so that the player stays now and then they decide later whether or not they're going to keep the player. So their team building approach is just different from everyone else's, and it just hasn't worked in recent years. And as far as free agency this year, I mean, they signed Chase Young, who is pretty much an underachieving at best defensive end. He came out of Ohio State with a lot of hype, similar to Jadeveon Clowney. Actually, he was supposed to be something that I don't think once you saw him on the NFL field, he wasn't going to be that kind of player. He's a big defensive end. He has a lot of athleticism, but it just doesn't translate into a lot of sacks. It translates more into him being a solid player on the defensive line who can stop the run, set the edge, that kind of stuff. They signed up a few like sort of journeyman type players like Cedric Wilson, wide receiver. He was in Dallas. He was then in Miami. Didn't get a lot of run in Miami. He's there. He's in New Orleans now. I don't expect him to get a lot of production there, but he's a solid player. I saw that they signed Willie Gay Jr. from the Chiefs, who I always thought was a good linebacker, if not a little bit wild. He plays out of structure a lot. But again, a really good athlete. And sometimes, the linebacker position, the way it is positioned in the league is, you kind of take chances on athletes and see how it develops. I guess I thought he had good production and good success in Kansas City, but the team didn't think that they needed to resign him. He signs in New Orleans. I think he'll be good there. But overall, they still have a lot of holes. They still have the ceiling on the team. Like I said last year, is pretty low. Especially because of the quarterback, but the talent overall on the team is just kind of mid, and not high potential at all.
Okay, yeah. So like the Saints are still a team. I want to feel like everybody and be like, I still don't like them, or I don't like them, or I don't think they're like in a good situation. I just look at what they had. It doesn't make sense to me how they were in the situation they were last year. Now, did they make a lot of moves this year? No. They did lose Jameis, though. They lost Jameis. Did they make a lot of moves? No, but I still look at this roster and I say they got a lot of talent. Like a lot of things I think fell through. I think Michael what's wide receiver name, number 13, Michael
Thomas.
Yeah, Michael Thomas. I'm curious to see what he is. That they definitely have a lot of ifs now, as opposed to where I felt like they were just like, these are pieces or places where they were strong. Now they got a couple ifs, and has
Michael Thomas been a good player since COVID? Like I think he's like I'm trying to remember when he even came in the league.
No,
I think he came in like 2018 or so. Had a really good couple of initial seasons.
Yeah,
and has just been like. Has he played 17 games since then?
So what I even coming out of college, the knock on Michael Thomas was like his work ethic, and he basically put that to shame. And he got and then he gets paid, and then it's like, all right, so what are we looking at? He got a couple injuries, so what are we looking like? I still think he's not old, and I still feel as though if his head is right, and because he's about to come to the end of his deal, and if he don't show something, he's not getting more money like that ever again. So I think in his head, this is a good opportunity for him to show or put forth that effort or put or quiet that skepticism about what he is. I think this is another opportunity for him to do that. But he's a guy who like broke the receiving receptions record in the NFL. I mean, like just to act like a guy is like gone at this young of an age, like he's not even really that old. So I'm
Right, but
curious.
he's not even on the team right now. He's a free agent. Like he's a free agent and is now like talking bad about the New Orleans Saints management. Like he's gone, and I think rightfully so. That's a good thing because he hasn't been good since 2019. Like that's we're a whole presidential season cycle away from when he was good. Like he's yeah, like
Barack,
let him go.
Barack,
He's
but
fine.
Barack was still in
Let
office when he was
Olave
good.
step in, see what Cedric Wilson can do. Maybe draft someone. I don't know, but like Michael Thomas, he's not. I don't think he's He's relevant in terms of like high level wide receiver play anymore. I think he's like he's a receiver you bring in at the end of free agency to sort of perhaps be a backup or maybe play in the slot to maybe a third wide receiver, that kind of thing.
Okay, yeah. So I'm once again, you're right, and that's where my skepticism starts to come in with terms of the Saints, the fact that some of these players are getting older, some of these things that were solidified are now becoming questions, you know. So I don't know. I really got to take a thought on them. And actually, I jumped the gun in terms of jumping from Carolina to New Orleans. So we're just going to finish off right here with New Orleans, and I want to hear what do they need to do in terms of the draft,
Okay.
like their draft needs and stuff, and then we'll jump back to Carolina. I kind of jumped the gun. I got excited. It's season 4. I got excited. Sorry, guys. So finish off with New Orleans. So what do they need to do in terms of drafting to get back to that place where we can look at them and say, oh, okay, they're a legitimate team in the NFC South.
I mean, they have a lot of holes in the team. They have, like their offensive line draft picks over the last few years haven't worked out, so they could definitely draft a tackle. They could definitely improve their defense at each level. So defensive tackle, linebacker. There's not a lot of linebackers in the first 2 rounds that I would look at. But defensive line, linebacker, and secondary, they could definitely draft any of those positions. I would actually recommend that they trade their first round pick to get more picks and start the process of getting younger on their team and on their roster across the board. They just have a lot of old players that are, they're just like you said, they're just going to continue to get old, especially on defense. That get a couple more picks, let these players play these last seasons out, and just start the rebuilding process as gracefully as you can.
So your expectations for them are pretty low. It sounds that way.
Yeah, I don't see them having much success this season. But a successful season would be
Yeah.
them after this year moving on from a lot of those older players and having some young talent that actually shows some production and some promise in their rookie years.
Yeah, you know what? Actually hearing this, even just hearing things up. See, that's why I brought you on now. See, you thought I was playing. This is the kind of stuff that I need. So, yeah. So I am a little bit lower on New Orleans, and I can kind of see it. Even when I look at their needs, like they got needs all over the board. They got offensive tackle needs. They got edge rusher needs. They got wide receiver needs. They got defensive line needs, like defensive tackle. I mean, tight end. Like these are all major positions. You know what I mean?
Exactly.
So, yeah, they're really bad at a lot of places, or they have to replenish a lot of places, and I think you're right. So trying to fix the Saints, what they need is to trade back, replenish their picks, replenish their line, get depth, and then next year suck this year, and then next year make a move for some more stars.
Yeah, and yeah, that's the answer. I mean, Derek Carr isn't taking you anywhere. Maybe somewhere take a flyer on like maybe a second round or third round quarterback, someone like Spencer Rattler. Just get him in the building. He's not the best quarterback at all in the draft, but I think he's actually a pretty credible quarterback that can come in and start learning. Therefore, even if the New Orleans Saints are a team that wins like 7-8 games this year, they're not in a position to draft a quarterback high next year. They at least have somebody in the building that they put in some time with already.
See, I don't like that draft strategy of getting quarterbacks and let's see how it goes. If we would do that, let me get like a 3rd round, 4th round, 5th round quarterback. And then, I mean, because I just don't like if it's either you believe in a quarterback or you don't. I don't believe in drafting 2nd round quarterbacks. Some have hit, but if I'm saying I believe in a quarterback, would I take him with the first 5 picks? If that answer is no, then that person needs to slide because it's a very big variable. So when you say bring in Spencer Ratliff, and let's see, or like even somebody like I wouldn't draft him, but like JJ McCarthy, they're saying he might go top 5 because the Chargers are there and hardball and stuff like that. He's got too many ifs for me to go that high. You know what I mean?
Yeah, no, I mean, like first of all, if JJ McCarthy, if the Chargers with who already have Herbert draft JJ McCartney, that would be wild. But I see what you're saying with the idea. I'm not thinking of Spencer Rattler as someone who is ultimately going to be your franchise quarterback. I'm thinking more of Spencer Rattler as someone who you can easily move off of Derek Carr after this season with, and have a credible quarterback going into the next season, just so you have someone in the position who because otherwise you're overpaying in free agency for a Joe Flacco type to try to start on your team. And I think it's better to draft a 2nd or 3rd round quarterback who, if that player is someone like Spencer Rattler, I'd rather do that than sort of
They're bringing like
go
Joe
through the
Flacco.
dregs of free agency trying to find your quarterback for a season, because you're going to overpay. You're going to spend a lot more for that quarterback than you would for your 2nd or 3rd round quarterback. The second and 3rd round quarterback is not going to be your franchise quarterback. I wouldn't base my future planning around this player. I would say that this is more like a bridge quarterback that I can get to future seasons with, and not overpay at the position.
Okay, cool. I can live with that. All right, so let's jump back to Carolina and their draft needs. What do they need in terms of drafting for you to contend in the NFC South or potentially make the playoffs?
Honestly, we'll talk about it when we get to Atlanta. It won't take a lot to contend in this division. This is why these are boring divisions that you gave me, because these are divisions that with teams that are at varying levels of rebuilding, or should be rebuilding. So it's to win these divisions, it might take 9 wins. But for Carolina, they kind of need everything. Ultimately, they need to have an understanding after the season of whether Bryce Young is going to be the quarterback going forward, if he's good enough to be that guy. So, I would have hoped that they could have done a little bit more in free agency to put some more veteran talent around him, especially at the wide receiver position. They didn't. They got Deontay Johnson from Pittsburgh, which I think he's fine. He's fine. I don't know that he's the person who's going to help Bryce Young demonstrate how good he is, but I think he's a bit of an upgrade from what they had. But they, offensive line, defensive line, they've walked away from some safeties, I believe, over the last couple of years. So some depth, or even some just talent in the secondary, especially at the safety position. I know Joe Horn Jr. He's there, and when he plays, he's really good, but he gets hurt a lot. So maybe start to future-proof that position as well. But this is just, they were 2-15 last year, so they have needs everywhere.
So that's exactly why. That's my problem when you release, or when you get rid of, or you don't re-sign Brian Burns. You're releasing somebody who is at least legitimately good enough, and you're going into a situation where this draft does not hold a lot of pass rushers, and you're not going to be able to replace that position. Now you're just worse at a critical position, and you didn't have to be. So, and it's not like they're paying everybody, but in terms of their draft needs, they're not going to be able to replace their pass rush. The pass rush just got worse, and that's just what it is. Offensive line's got to be at a premium. You know what I mean? I still look at Bryce Young. You ever look at it? Did you look at him on the field amongst everybody else? Listen, you got to protect him, man. I don't care what you're saying. You might want to draft 5 offensive linemen. Even though you got one, you still need depth. You might want to draft 5 offensive linemen and figure that out. But you're not, but wide receiver, like I said, Deontay Johnson, along with they still got Adam Thielen.
I believe he's still on the roster. Yes.
Yeah, Adam Thielen, you got Deontay Johnson. I mean, you can kind of figure that out. They still have Miles Sanders. I mean, they can figure it out, but what I'm saying is you got to protect him. You know what I mean? If he's special, I do think if he's special, he's got to be able to take like some of this talent at these specialty positions and do something with it. So my thought would be, let me protect him because I do have Miles Sanders. I got Deontay Johnson. Adam Thielen might be old, but we'll figure that out. And
Yeah,
I got to
and
protect him.
they have they drafted I was thinking Jonathan Mingo last year, who didn't have a great rookie year, but they I've heard good things about him. There's still a lot of promise in him, and so in terms of not being a high end elite receiver, but just being someone who's productive and good. I agree. You know, you gotta. That's why I'm like, you know, with Brian Burns, I was fine with them walking away from him because Brian Burns is not going to help prove whether Bryce Young is a good quarterback or not. They need those resources on the offensive side to see what they have with Bryce Young. So definitely, you know, offensive line a key to it all. Maybe add some skill position talent on offense as well in the draft, and just go from there.
Okay, sounds good. All right, so let's go shift to the surprise Tampa Bay Buccaneers from last year. Actually, I want to start with this one because I want to hear your rebuttal to it. So this year they re-signed Mike Evans and Antoine Winfield Jr. You know what I mean? They didn't really do too much. They got Shaquille Barrett, and that's basically everybody that they. Oh, and they got Carlton Davis as well. Oh, excuse me, they lost Carlton Davis. They lost Carlton Davis.
I think they traded him away, I think they traded him.
Yeah, so they lost. Excuse me, they lost Shaquille Barrett. They lost Carlton Davis, and they also lost to the Eagles, right? The linebacker.
Yeah, White. Was it Devin White?
Yeah, Devin White. So but for me, I think they're resetting. Just like when you talk about New Orleans, that's what I see when I see Tampa Bay because they signed Baker Mayfield. I always have this theory: you never sign a good quarterback to great money. Was Baker Mayfield better than we thought he was last year, or was he better than anticipated last year? Yes, but now you're in a situation where you got to lose players now, all because you wouldn't admit that he's not the answer and force yourself to do something extreme to get to the answer. You know what I mean? So I think anytime that you do that, I look at those teams and I say, oh, we're on the way down. You signed a good quarterback for great money. You lost players. Yeah, we're resetting. So that's exactly what I see from them in terms of free agency. But tell me what you think about what I said.
I think they are a bit of a confusing team because on one hand, like you said, they're letting good players walk. But on the other hand, they're re-signing good players as well. So they're not, it's like they're trying to remain credible, but and not completely start over and rebuild. But they're also not going all in either with the players that they have. Re-signing, once they re-signed Mike Evans, it was pretty clear to me that they were going to bring back Baker Mayfield because you don't sign a veteran receiver unless you have a credible quarterback to throw to him. I understand what you're saying about re-signing Baker Mayfield and him being a decent quarterback, not a great quarterback. I didn't think he signed for that much money relative to the quarterback market, but it was a good amount of money.
It wasn't team friendly.
I mean, I don't know what does that mean? What's team friendly? When
so have you heard Baker Mayfield signed for a team friendly deal? No, he got paid. He got his money. So I will tell you. Keep talking. I'll tell you in 1 second.
Yeah. So I mean, I think he's a credible quarterback. They didn't do much in free agency. They basically, like you said, re-signed a lot of their players. Lavonte David is back. He's a very old linebacker at this point. In his heyday, he was one of the greats, but not anymore. They just didn't do much in free agency. It feels like they're trying to tread water and not bottom out and still be a credible team and compete for the division title and get to the playoffs, but just not ready to take the hard steps of a complete rebuild. And I understand that, especially at the quarterback position, because they didn't have a pick this year that would allow for them to get a top of the draft quarterback. By the time they pick at 19. Even JJ McCarthy will be gone at that point. So,
right. So, Baker Mayfield, he signed 3 years, $100 million. That was his extension.
Yeah. So that's like $33 million a year. I don't know how much he got guaranteed. Maybe like $50 million of that is guaranteed.
That I don't see.
Yeah. I mean, getting being basically guaranteed $25 million per year at the quarterback position. That's That's fine. That's not, while it's not, I don't know if it's like a team friendly deal, might have been 20 million a year. It's not much less. And he definitely wasn't signing in the top end of the position, which is now in the 50s and almost 60s now. So, it was a fine deal. It's a
Okay.
mid-market deal, which didn't exist before, which kind of exists now with him and his quarterback, Geno Smith in Seattle.
Okay. Cool. Cool. All right. So we're gonna jump into their draft needs. So for me, just like you said they're in a weird area where they're not going to compete, but they're not rebuilding either, and they're still seeing how well they could be. For me, in this offseason, they got worse. And if you're in NFL, if you're not getting worse, or if you're not getting better, you're getting worse. So even if they're just as good based off of the net, they're worse than they were last year. And if you're going to be worse, I think these moves then don't make sense. Like I wouldn't have brought back Mike Evans, you know what I mean, and I would have drafted a young wide receiver. I wouldn't have brought back Baker Mayfield, and I would have figured that out. But yeah, now the needs that they have like edge rusher needs. They still have wide receiver needs, even with Mike Evans coming back. They got cornerback needs because they lost Carlton Davis. Linebacker needs, of course, and everything like that. So for me, I think their draft needs, like I think they're a person who it in their head, they don't think that they're rebuilding, so they'd have to draft a player. And I would probably, if I to make a big impact, it would be an edge rusher in this draft. If they have I think they have a low enough pick to get Jared Verse, I think it is, or somebody like that. But
Yeah, I think Jared Verse will still be around at that point. And he's a good player, but he's more in line of like that, like Jadeveon Clowney, what Jadeveon Clowney actually is,
great.
versus what the promise of Jadeveon Clowney was supposed to be. Set that he's a big versus a big, strong defensive end, set the edge. Someone you can definitely win with, but not a 12 sack a year kind of guy. I agree. I think it's more like best player on the board. That might be a offensive tackle. That might be a defensive end. It won't be a linebacker. It might be a cornerback or a safety. Not a safety, probably maybe a cornerback. They could draft a wide receiver. For them, it would just be like best player on the board and build from there. I will say I don't think Devin White was good. I wasn't happy as an Eagles fan. I wasn't happy when the Eagles signed him. He's just a very while he's incredibly athletic, he does not fit any defensive structure at all. Like he doesn't. His ability to like
I know
literally
exactly what you mean.
Levante David. There's film. You can like look it online of Levante David telling Devin White where to go before the play starts. Like you go that way right there. Or you're gonna go over there.
I
Like
agree.
dude
I
just
agree.
didn't have it. So that's fine.
Well, see what
Don't be mad. And he was a top 5 pick. I think it was the number 5 pick when he was drafted.
Yeah,
He
absolutely.
was, like
Absolutely.
had a lot of hype coming and rightfully so coming out of college. But just when he got to the league, he was, a big athlete who just didn't really learn how to play football.
So let's hurry up on this one. Let's get through these Falcons real quick. So the Atlanta Falcons. So I'll say this: when it comes to Atlanta, I actually think they're my favorites in this, and I think it's pretty clear. There is something on their roster I don't like, and I don't like their tight end. I don't like Kyle Pitts. I've never really been a fan of his, but I like when you get Kirk Cousins coming into the season. In terms of situation, he's probably going to produce the best of the quarterbacks in this division. You know what I mean? I do think that whatchamacallit from Carolina, Bryce Young is better, but after all the holes that he's gonna have to like I think that's too much of a tall task without the proper protection there. When it comes to Kirk Cousins in there, I do think he can right the ship and make it easier. They got their running back, you know what I mean? They got their wide receiver. I'm just a guy. I don't like wide receivers that don't block well. That doesn't make sense to me. Um, but you got him. He is a threat, and I think Kirk Cousins working with somebody like Kirk Cousins as opposed to a Riddler. What's his name?
Ritter, Ritter.
Ritter. Ritter. I think can bode well. I think their defense was good, not great, but it was definitely solid enough, and they didn't lose many pieces outside of that. There's nobody who they really lost like that. So I
Yeah,
think
no,
the
I
continuity
so
quarterback. Yeah,
Yeah,
go ahead.
I mean, I think the Kirk Cousins hate has to stop. Like Bryce Young has shown nothing to suggest that he's better
That's
than
not
Kirk
fair.
Cousins.
But that's not fair.
But I don't know where you can like if I understand it's a bad situation for him. I get it. I 100% get it. He didn't overperform that bad situation though. Like it's not like he had like you can make an argument that like Justin Herbert last year overperformed the lack of talent on offense because he's hitting wide receivers downfield and they're just dropping the ball.
I'm not going to make that point.
Exactly, but I'm saying there's an argument to be made for someone like that in that situation. There's an argument to be made there. Bryce Young just didn't do anything. Like he didn't do anything to suggest he's a credible quarterback in the NFL. Now, it was a bad situation, so there's potential there still based on what he did in college. But to say that like he's a better quarterback in the NFL than Kirk Cousins, that's crazy. Kirk Cousins is a very good NFL quarterback. He's not he's limited in terms of his ability on the field, and it will be limited even more coming off of a torn Achilles from last season. But I fully expect him to be the best quarterback in the division this season. I fully expect him to get more out of the tight end Kyle Pitts, the receiver. I forgot his name now, the big guy. I forgot the receiver's name. From USC. Yeah, I can see him playing.
Drake.
Yes, Drake London, right? That's his name.
London.
Yeah. I think he'll get the most out of them. They signed Darryl Mooney in free agency. He'll be their like fast, slot kind of maybe even gadgety kind of receiver. He won't be relied upon to be the best receiver on the team like he was in Chicago. So like, I think their offense is going to be better. They spent a lot of money in free agency on defense last year, and so I think that should carry over into this year. I think this is perhaps even just clearly the best team in the NFC South.
Yeah, and I don't think that's even a question. So, in terms of their needs for me, my question isn't are they going to make the playoffs? How do they advance, and what do they need in the playoffs to advance into the playoffs? It was funny because I looked at what their needs were. At the top of the list is edge rusher, and I definitely feel as though they need an edge rusher. They need a pass rush. They need something to add a certain dynamic aspect to their defense, which I think could bode very much. That would pan out so much more or so much better because they have a solid defense behind it. So if they could say, all right, we can get there fast enough, that's what it is.
Yeah, I agree. I don't think that they need to reach for they don't have to draft a quarterback anymore, obviously. So they don't have to be reaching for JJ McCartney or anything like that. I don't know if there's a good enough defensive end at the pick that they select. I think they picked 8 this year. And I don't know that there's a good enough one where you're not reaching for a defensive end in that position. I think they could do very well improving their offensive line, making things easier for Kirk Cousins. It's not a particular need. It's not the most pressing need that they have. But if someone like Joe Alt slipped to them at 8, I think they should run to the podium to select them.
Got you. So I got a question for you now. So we had a conversation about second round quarterbacks briefly. Would you draft a second round quarterback now that you have Kirk Cousins and stuff like that? Or were you like, no?
No, I wouldn't. I would expect Kirk Cousins to be the quarterback for the next 2 seasons at least. And so I wouldn't worry about having to move on from him after a season and having the worry of, do I have somebody in place that can sort of be a bridge quarterback going forward, or spend money in free agency that I don't want to for a quarterback there. Kirk Cousins is a quarterback. I would use my draft capital elsewhere.
Okay, cool. We're going to wrap up this segment and then we're going to get to the next one. I just want you to know that was real impressive what you did with the NFC South there, man. I don't know too many other people that could bring that kind of jazz to that kind of situation. I just want you to know.
I just want you to know that it required a lot of research to figure out how to make that any kind of way entertaining, because a lot of those teams are just bums.
It took somebody special, and that's what you are.
I like how you turned the challenge into the opportunity. That's good stuff right there.
I'm a great motivator in that kind of way. Okay. So now we did the NFC South. Now we're gonna get to the AFC South. In this division, has a lot of special has a special team in there,
I have some special thoughts for them.
And I'm sure you do. And we're gonna save that one for a little bit, just for a little bit,
Okay. So we're starting with
So let's start with. Well, let's start with when we did it last time. Let's start with the dumpster fire of this division. The Tennessee Titans. They went 6-11 last year. So where do we go with the Tennessee Titans?
Well, I mean, they were very active in the offseason. They signed Calvin Ridley to a deal that I think at first blush seemed like an overpay, but I think in reality, it's somewhere in line with it's the deal. What's the other receiver in Tampa Bay? Not Mike Evans, but
Oh, the fast one. He's real fast. I can't think of his name right now either.
he's like a big slot guy. He's a big body guy, but he's in the slot.
Just keep going. Just keep going.
But yeah, like the Ridley deal is basically a market upgrade from what that deal was for that receiver. Meaning that it was basically in line. Like, you know, it's he's even less against the cap than that receiver. I need to find out the guy. The guy's name. This is gonna bother me. Chris Godwin. Chris Godwin's deal and Calvin Ridley are basically the same with all the inflation stuff going on with the cap going up. So it's actually a pretty good deal. They traded for Darius Sneed to a deal that I thought was fair for the player and the compensation for the player as well. They're doing the thing they signed Tony Pollard in the offseason. They're doing the thing that I think you should do when you have a rookie quarterback who still has a lot to prove, which is to say, put the talent around him to take away all the excuses of why this guy didn't perform well, if that's the case. But if Will Levis does perform well, this would be the kind of offseason that the general manager can look back on and say, like, I made the right decisions here because I put the talent around him. So, like, you know, upgrades a running back, upgrades a receiver. They still need some help on the offensive line, but we can talk about that in the draft part of the conversation. I thought they did a very good job.
So my question is, what happens if the Titans find out that Will Levis was not the answer and they should not have drafted him? And then what?
Well, then you have Calvin Ridley. Like, his deal is basically a 2-year deal, so you have him for another season. If Will Levis is not the guy, then that probably means you're going to draft high in the next year's draft. So you're probably in position to draft a quarterback next season, high in the first round. So I don't think there's any harm in the moves that they made this year.
I just think so. I asked that question because I think more teams should just admit we drafted the wrong guy. I don't think Will Levis is going to end up being the guy. He doesn't even. So it's going to sound this sounds emotional, but it is based in logic. I do think quarterbacks have a certain temperament and a certain way about them. Like, quarterbacks are a little bit, I think, nerdier, a little bit less cool. And you know what I mean? And I think that always is the kind of things that, like, I don't think that you really want to just hang out with a really talented quarterback anymore, because I think they're into something that you're probably not anymore. That's my thought. And Will Levis even when he came out of college, he was like taking like shirt pics, showing his abs, you know what I mean? Stuff like that. And I'm like, that's not a quarterback, bro. It's not a quarterback.
I would disagree, actually. The quarterback, an NFL quarterback, has been the man since he was like 8 years old. He has been the most popular person in school for basically his entire life that he can remember. Now, whether he's actually cool or if he's only cool because he's the quarterback, that's a different conversation. But he's been the man. He's been the guy for all of his life. And with that comes, like, you know, a lot of attention in grade school, junior high school, college. And I would say that the personality type of a quarterback is more in line with like the not nerd guy versus the nerd guy. I guess there's guys like, you know, like Kirk Cousins who fit more like a nerd type model, but like I don't think Patrick Mahomes is a nerd. I don't think Tom Brady was. I don't think Tom Brady was. I don't. I mean,
I do think Tom Brady was.
When I think nerd, I'm not talking about their level of intelligence. I'm talking more about like their presence and sort of like how they act around people. And those guys act around people like they are the best player in the room all the time. They have been geared towards and trained towards being the leader of the team for basically their whole lives. They're the guys who like, you know, I've heard, I think Bill Simmons has this test of like, if five guys are going out for a night on the town, who's the one who takes the keys and is in charge of where we're going? The quarterback is the guy who's in charge of where we're going, and he's the guy who everyone gravitates towards. I think now I'm also not sure Will Levis fits the man and sort of in personality type. I think he's kind of corny, but you know, all that said, in general, the position of quarterback is the guy who's been the most popular person in schools for his whole life.
So like he's popular, but like you said it, he never had to work on anything. Like he could have been playing with Legos and whatever it is that he was into, he was a quarterback, so they were just going to say he was cool. So who it is, he never had to develop his personality. He never had to really like be that guy, because when everybody else is doing stuff, he's probably like, I'm gonna chill home, you know what I mean? I'm gonna watch film, you know. That's what made Tom Brady. He was interested in game film, and like nobody's trying to watch 6 hours of game film, you know what I mean? That's just a weird thing. That's weird, you know what I mean? If we're gonna just put it out there like that, I think Patrick Mahomes is like that, and I'm not saying anything bad about quarterbacks. I'm just simply saying a quarterback to me should have a quirk that basically says he not the guy that's going to want to go out 2 nights a week.
Yeah, I think
that's all I'm basically trying to say.
I think that stuff is that like I'm going to actually focus on watching film versus going to the club. I think that starts when they get in college. I don't think that's like I think the personality, whatever the personality is, has already been cemented by the time it clicks in their mind that practically, if I'm going to be the best at this job, I'm going to take the time to do the things necessary to prepare. That's a mature, more adult thought process than like, I'm the man, I'm the best at everything, all the girls love me, all the guys want to be me kind of situation that quarterbacks generally grow up in, because they've been that guy their whole lives.
That's fair. That's fair. So all of the point that I was making by that was Will Levis is the guy that wants the attention. And as a guy who wants the attention, wants to be out there, wants to be seen, I don't think that he's going to end up working out there. And I saw that before he even came into the league. And it was the same thing about like Johnny Manziel. Johnny Manziel is cool. I would love to, me and Johnny Manziel today can go to Vegas right now. Okay. I'm going with Johnny Manziel. He's at the top of the list. Is he an NFL quarterback? No, and it's because of the fact that he would do that, and he's cool like that. You know what I mean? So him, I think if you compared on just cool factor like Tom Brady and Johnny Manziel, I think you kind of can see where I'm going with that a little bit.
Yeah, I mean, look, my mileage on Johnny Manziel ran out a long time ago, so I see what you're saying, even though I personally disagree. But that's just me personally. I see what you're saying. I get your point. I would say, just taking it back to like whether Will Levis is going to be a success or not. I think he has a better chance of being a success than Bryce Young, who doesn't have any of these personality traits that you're putting on Will Levis, but also is 195 pounds at 5'10" and has not demonstrated anything yet. Yeah, Will Levis actually has like won games and has, you know, has production in the NFL that is higher than what someone like Bryce Young has so far, and they're in the same draft class, so you can compare them. Different situations, I understand that. With that said, I would, and especially given that Tennessee spent a 2nd round pick on Will Levis, and Carolina spent the number 1 overall pick on Bryce Young, I feel a lot more comfortable betting on Will Levis's success than Bryce Young, and therefore spending money to put around him to ensure success or to help ensure success. I feel a lot more comfortable doing that with him than Bryce Young in Carolina. Like and you need to do that with Bryce Young, because you need to find out if he's going to be the guy. Because regardless if he's the 1st overall pick or not, like, he's your starting quarterback. You put resources behind him. You got to figure out quickly if he's going to be the one to lead you for the next 5 or so years. You still got to do that with him, but I think Will Levis is better at this stage in his career, and therefore the need to demonstrate that success in a real way, like, you know, win like, you know, more than 6 games, 7 games during a season, I think is a more credible decision to make.
I think you said a lot there, and I disagree with what you just said. But we'll see. We'll see.
You think Bryce Young was better than Will Levis last season? That's what you're saying. That's your point. That's the premise of your
I
of your
think
of
it's
your
so.
understanding.
I think Bryce Young was so deprived of talent. It's like I can't evaluate him as an NFL prospect based off of what he had. He had no offensive line. He had no weapons. He had a running back that you even said to, like so like, and he had Brian Burns and then really nothing else even on defense. I don't know any quarterback. You could give him Tom. You could put Patrick Mahomes there, and there's still going to be 3 wins, 4 wins. Like I just don't think people go there in that situation with all of that not being there and say I'm going to be successful right off the bat. I
I
don't.
agree. I agree with that, but I think that means that you don't know anything about Bryce Young yet. I don't think that means therefore Bryce Young is better than the player who actually had more production. I think that means that Bryce Young is an unknown commodity in the almost the fullest extent of the term.
Okay. All right,
That does
cool.
not equate to he's actually better than Will Levis. We just don't know it yet.
All right, that's fair. So tell me, all right, so tell me draft needs for Tennessee. What do they need to take that step? And are we having a conversation about them taking a step into like contending in the AFC South, maybe winning a playoff game? Where if they do this, what's their expectation then?
So as far as the draft is concerned, their first round pick should be offensive line. Joe Alt. I think there's another guy coming out of Penn State. I forgot his name, but they're different styles of left tackle. Alt being a more powerful guy, and the Penn State prospect being not finesse, but he has like better footwork, better handwork. He's more of a technician. He's lighter. He's not a road grader like Joe Alt is. Those are the two, I think, best O tackles, and they should be looking at O tackle heavily early in the draft. As far as what they can expect from this season, I think if there is, given that there isn't that progress is not linear all the time, that a player can be good their rookie year and then appear like they fell off their second year, and then the third year they bounce back, and have, like, progress doesn't always go in a step like that. That said, if Will Levis improves at all from last season, I think they could contend for a wild card spot in the AFC. I wouldn't expect them to win a playoff game, but that would kind of depend on where Will Levis is in his development by the end of the season going into the playoffs.
Mm-hmm.
He could be, he could be kind of like a Joe Flacco style quarterback, even at Joe Flacco's best, where it's like a lot of play action and just throw the ball deep. Use your strong arm to use his strong arm to throw deep. If he's that kind of guy and he gets better at it, that's not a high end quarterback, but that's somebody who can win games and be dangerous in a playoff, in a wild card game going on the road. So that's what I would expect.
Right. So for me, I think offensive tackle is at the top of that list because you do have to give him an opportunity to show where he's at. But I just look at him. I kind of see a guy who's probably going to have a lot of turnovers and take a lot of risks that he maybe shouldn't and stuff like that. So I think if you're not going to get edge, I think cornerback is the next position that I think Tennessee really needs to hit on, because they're going to have to figure out how to stop people get turnovers and protect protect Will Levis. That's what my thought process is about him. Let's move on to, that was good though. I like that. I liked what you said there, but he's not it though. Let's go.
I don't know that he's it either. I'm not saying that this is going to be successful. I'm saying it's just a better bet than
in
Bryce
comparison to Bryce Young. I get what you're saying. I heard you. Oh, I heard you. All right. So next, let's go to we can go to my Colts. Let's go to my Indianapolis Colts. Let's talk about greatness real quick.
Young. Okay, cool. Go ahead. You start this one. Because I don't know where to start with Colts and greatness. I can't get ahead there. So you take me there.
Okay, so if you remember what I said about last year about Anthony Richardson, I even going back to the draft, I'm the type of person, once again, I don't want the most athletic, biggest armed quarterback in the draft. I think there's far more quality that go to success. And I think he took advantage of what he was, his God-given gifts. And, I think it got him hurt. You know what I mean? So I want to see his progression in year 2 in terms of him just developing as a passer, making smarter decisions, understanding that yes, this person that's 6'4" is also running a 4.3 for some strange reason, and I might want to I understand that. So I want to see that. I think as a roster, our moves, I think a lot of keeping our continuity because we didn't make a lot of. We're just not a routinely a big splash. When we failed actually, if you remember correctly. Um, but I think our offensive line rebounded from the previous season and keeping that together. I think bringing back Michael Pittman um, is good. I would have liked to see maybe upgrade. Like I was actually targeting maybe like T. Higgins. I think T. Higgins might be actually maybe a better player than Michael Pittman. And I was looking at that. But I'm not mad that he's back. I want to see what happens with Zach Moss because I don't want Jonathan Taylor having all of the rushes that he had the 2 years ago. I liked having somebody else compliment him. I think that talking about draft, I think that's something that they'll try to look at as well. Um, but yeah, so like I think retaining what was there, getting the continuity is a great start. I just know when I evaluated us from last year, there was just certain positions, meaning big places being wide receiver and another pass rusher that I think would have paid big, huge dividends, which is why I was like, yo, can we just go get Brian Burns? Because I'm like, if we had another person that could basically, because our pass rush was good, like as a unit, but it was like as a unit, it wasn't like we haven't had that guy that says go get him in a long
Mm.
time. And I think Brian Burns, he might have other deficiencies in his game. With the rest of our rotation, he's a guy that we can say go get him, and defenses gotta attest to that. So we didn't get that, but I'm not mad at our free agency, but I just would have. I'm curious to see what moves we make now in the draft because we brought back the continuity and we have depth at a lot of positions and we're good at a lot of positions. We're good at a lot of positions, some of which are positions that you don't necessarily have to be the best at. And I think
Yeah.
that's kind of been a little bit of a problem for us. Go ahead.
Yeah, I mean, yeah, they didn't, like you said, they didn't do much in free agency. I think the most money they spent on a player was somebody named Grover Stewart, who I had never heard of. But shout
He's
out to
good.
Grover
He's
Stewart for
good.
getting your money.
He's good. So Grover
Came, where
Stewart,
do you,
yeah, he's he's
but
he's a, he's a bigger guy. He's more like a nose tackle. He's like that three technique. He's a big guy, but he was good. Like our defense, you could tell a little bit of a difference in our run defense when he was playing and when he was hurt last year. I could see that.
got it. Okay, well, great for him. Good to go for the team. Zach Moss is gone. He's in Cincinnati now. I mean, I think they still have a lot of questions to answer with Richardson. He didn't play a lot last year. When he played, he definitely flashed. And flashed a lot of potential both as a runner and as a passer. I liked what I saw from him as a passer. But he needs more reps. So like there's just getting him out there, reading defenses more. I think he can do it. I just like I said last year, I thought that the deficiencies around him were not the usual ones that people think are just where the quarterback's going to fail. I think he's smarter than people gave him credit for, and his ability to read defenses is more. He just needs the reps. They didn't do much. They re-signed Pittman. I thought that was fine. It's a fine deal. He's basically at that T. Higgins level receiver. Maybe T. Higgins is a little bit better in terms of what he brings, like a little bit more versatile in what he
Yes,
brings.
yes, he's more dynamic. T. Higgins is more.
But it seems like there's a difference, a difference in opinion between the Bengals and the rest of the league, basically, in terms of what the value for a T. Higgins is, because you also have to sign T. Higgins to his next deal right away. So yeah, I think Cincinnati is expecting something like a first round pick, maybe an early second round pick, and I think the rest of the league is like that. Given that I gotta pay him, whatever it is I gotta pay him.
Absolutely.
That's like a third, maybe fourth round pick. In terms of what he ultimately is, because he's a very good receiver, but he's not a great receiver. At least he hasn't demonstrated that to be the case. So I think it's a lot of wait and see with the Colts. I think they just need to continue to build the team the way they do in the draft. Be opportunistic in free agency, but I think they're on a fine path. They're just it's just not exciting.
Okay, cool. So tell me, what do we need in the draft to contend, and where do you see the Colts this year? Do you see us contending for the AFC, definitely being in the playoffs? If they do what you think, maybe advancing. Where do you see the ceiling for the Indianapolis Colts?
Yeah, I mean, I think they contend for a wild card similar to Tennessee. Um, I don't see them being good enough, talented enough on the roster to be a legitimate threat for the division. versus Houston. But things fall their way, and Houston does not have the season that they hope for. Like I said, progress is not always linear. And you're walking into week 16, week 17, and they're a game out there. Each team is only a game between the two of them. And I can see an outcome like that where like they play each other the last game of the season for the division, like that kind of thing. Mm-hmm. That's possible for sure. I think they're in a good place in terms of their team building process. I think it's obvious, but they're not built to win a Super Bowl this year, and I think that's okay. They have a rookie quarterback. They basically started over a few years ago, so they're building the team and they're doing a good job of it.
Okay, so like I said, the one problem that I have with my Colts is we're great at positions that we don't necessarily have to be great at. So like when I look at the top of the board, the first three things that we need: cornerback, wide receiver, edge, and those are all positions that bode more results than having the best guard in the game or having the best.
Those are premium positions for sure.
Yeah,
outside of quarterback, they might be the most premium. Maybe offensive tackle too, but yeah, I see your point.
Yeah. So for me, I don't know. Like I don't think cornerback is our biggest need. I think we should grab one. I don't think cornerback is our biggest need. Like I said, if we hit on wide receiver and edge, of course, I don't think we're going to be able to hit on edge this year. But if those two things were filled, I do think the Colts could contend. You know what I mean? Because usually, if you think about it, outside of Patrick Mahomes doing, I don't know what he is with alien or what alien race he came from, but quarterbacks usually don't get paid the top of the league money and win Super Bowls at the same time. That usually doesn't happen. It usually happens on rookie deals and after you made all your money. So the fact that what Patrick Mahomes is doing is like he's, I don't know how to explain it, but it usually comes from a place where, this quarterback, this dynamic quarterback is going to get one in while he's on his rookie deal, i.e. like a Russell Wilson, or things like that. I think, but once again, I don't think we're going to hit on pass rush enough to contend, but I do think we can advance in the play. I think we could win the division and advance in the playoffs, but we're going to talk about Houston in a second, but Houston would be the team that I'm looking at and saying.
I mean, yeah, you've already had to apologize to CJ Stroud, so I guess you're just underestimating.
You ain't had to say it like that.
You're just underestimating again. We'll talk about them in a minute. As far as the draft for the Colts, it's boring, but they should just pick the best player available. That might be a receiver, someone like Brian Thomas coming out of LSU. I don't think Malik Nabers will be there by the time they're picking. I think they pick like 15th, so they're in the middle of the first round. Those defensive ends will be available, both Verse and Dallas Turner from Alabama. They're different types of defensive ends. Dallas Turner is more of the speed rusher, get to the quarterback guy, where Verse, like I said, is more of the set the edge, stop the run, be solid guy. There's offensive linemen. There's O tackles that are there. I don't think it's a need, but I don't think you should shy away from it if that's the best player available. Because, the draft is more about the next 4 or 5 seasons, not necessarily the upcoming season. So you don't really know what your needs will be on the offensive line after the season or going into next season. But yeah, if I were them, if Dallas Turner is there, I think they should take him and they would be happy to have him. Probably not Jared Verse, only because they have Kwity Paye and they're
right, exactly
similar types of defensive end. The wide receivers are interesting because
this is the wide receiver draft.
It is, but like the best ones that will probably be available where the Colts pick is like Brian Thomas, who's basically like who's the other receiver for the Colts now? The guy who's
Downs, Josh Downs.
No, the other guy,
Alec Pierce.
Brian Thomas is, if he's really good, he's a better version of Alec Pierce, which would be good, which would be an upgrade. But you're talking about the same kind of like pure speed down the field guy. I don't know if that's what they need right now. I don't know if they're ready to move on from Alec Pierce and to have someone like Brian Thomas and the wings waiting. Cornerback will be available there. There's a lot of corners and safety types who will be available there. It's the guy from Iowa, I forgot his name, but he's really good.
I catch up on the draft now too, so don't even worry about that.
He's like a corner safety hybrid kind of guy. But Quinyon Mitchell, I believe his name is, from Toledo, is apparently the best corner in the draft. And he's really good. He went to Toledo. He's the man. There's the two corners from Alabama, Kool-Aid McKendry and Terrion Arnold, I believe his name is.
Mhm.
Both really good corners. I wouldn't be upset if I were the Colts and walked away with one of those guys as well. I think it's just the best player at the position, best player available
I
kind
see
of
what you're
situation.
saying. So if everything that you said was true, in conclusion, if everything that you said was true, I would like us to get that wide receiver, even if it's a little bit of a reach. Go get the wide receiver because I think the defensive end pass rusher, it's very iffy if they're going to be productive or not. So if you are like, let me hit on something is going to have the most value. Of course, it'll be easy to say cornerback, but I think there's a lot of cornerbacks, and I think there's more cornerbacks than wide receivers in this draft. So round 2, I feel better about grabbing a cornerback in round 2 than even a wide receiver, and definitely not a pass rusher. So that's what I would do.
Got you. Cooper DeJean is the Iowa corner that I'm talking about. I It's interesting. I know that the cornerback position is deep in this draft. If I was looking at round 2, I think the wide receivers in round 2 are better than the cornerbacks who have those similar grades.
That's fair.
There's a guy, Troy Franklin, coming out of Oregon State, Oregon, I believe, actually. He's really good. There's a guy, Keon Coleman from Florida State. He's probably going to be a second round pick. I might, if I were the Colts, I might do the corner in the first round and then see what's available at wide receiver in the second
I
round.
see what you're saying. Okay, and that would be fine too. That would be fine too. All right. Let's move on to your Jacksonville Jaguars. And I'm calling them your Jacksonville Jaguars because you had a lot to say about them last year. I just want you to know. Take us back a couple of months. Jamal, you said there's going to be 14 wins. It was going to be the first seed in the AFC. They were, and I remember being astonished, like, we talking about Jacksonville? And they missed the playoffs completely, and that's fine. Let's talk about their offseason and so far and where what they did, what they lost. They lost Calvin Ridley, of course, and we can go in further on that.
They didn't do well. All right, so like they lost Calvin Ridley. Like I said, progress is not linear. And for Jacksonville on offense, like it fell apart really, really fast for them. Because at one point they were like 9-4 or 9-5. And the number 2 seed at that position, and then like the rest of the season just fell off. Calvin Ridley was great for them in theory, but in practice he just wasn't good enough to be the true number 1 on that team. And so like the fact that they moved on from him, they're definitely worse at the position. Because they didn't do much to replace him. I mean, they signed Gabriel Davis from Buffalo, who is like a lesser version of.
He's a third option. He's a third option. He's very.
He's what I think Brian Thomas is going to be. Ultimately, just a fast guy who, is like he'll end up with 800 yards over the course of a season, but 2 of those games, he'll have 3 touchdowns each and 200 yards or something like that. Like,
right.
Big boomer bust kind of guy.
Let me ask you a question.
Armstead on defense, who I think is good and will solidify what they're doing up front, because the recent draft picks on the defensive end, at least especially at defensive end, haven't really worked out as of yet. So I think this is also a very important season for Jacksonville, for the head coach, for the quarterback, in terms of what the next few seasons for those 2 individuals will be. I think there's still a lot of hype around Trevor Lawrence, but he hasn't. I bought into it last season. I'm not buying into it this season. Like I'm not on the it was everyone else's fault with Trevor Lawrence. I think he has to do more. If he's the guy who we thought he was, he has to do more to overcome the deficiencies of the team. I think that's the goal of a quarterback who you sign to that second contract. That now that they're being paid all that money and they're taking up a larger percentage of the salary cap, that they're able to overcome the deficiencies that will come from the fact that you can't invest in other positions. And he has to do that. And he hasn't done it yet.
Gotcha.
They sort of a sneaky signing was they their center, I think his name is Mitch Moore, who's not a big name, but he will definitely improve their offensive line, which I think they definitely need. So they did some good things on the edges. I think Mitch Moore is actually a better signing than to say he was a signing on the edges. But it's a whole team that has to actually reach the potential that they have on paper.
Okay. Yeah. So for me, like I said, Jacksonville got a lot of players on their team that it sounded good at the time, but now they've really got to hit, like Josh Allen. I'm not sure if Josh Allen is it. I think, you know what I mean? He hasn't been bad, but when you draft him before Aiden Hutchinson, I mean, he ain't that.
That wasn't Josh Allen though, right? This is the other guy.
No,
Josh Allen was the guy who he's like in his like fifth season now.
he just sent an extension. Yeah.
Yeah, but the guy who they signed instead of Aiden Hutchinson was like 2 seasons ago. That was like a season ago or 2 seasons ago in the draft. That's not Josh Allen.
Okay.
Let me see.
Yeah, you can look that up either way. Either way, the point that I'm making is I think a lot of these decisions, it was like we praise them for making these decisions, but we're looking at them and we're like, all right, I really need them to hit on that. You know what I mean?
Yeah, no, for sure. Like,
and now, I look at them as a team that might have peaked, as opposed to with that comeback win when they beat the Chargers and they were down 29 points. They might have peaked more than where they're going, because I think the AFC South, we look at the Colts and the Texans, has gotten better, and I'm not sure. I think last year you walked into the season saying, oh, Trevor Lawrence is absolutely positively, even going forward, going to be the best quarterback in the AFC South. And now you look back and you say, he might be the third best.
Yeah, I mean, look, I don't know if that's the case. Like, who's second in that conversation?
It might be Anthony Richardson.
Yeah,
I'm giving it to CJ Stroud to be like the best. I'm like CJ Stroud. I'm all in on CJ Stroud. Anthony Richardson,
I agree there.
Might be a little better than him.
So the guy we were talking about is Trayvon Walker. He was the one who they drafted ahead of.
Oh, that was Trayvon Walker. You're absolutely
Aiden Hutchinson. Josh Allen has actually turned into a pretty good rush end. And they just signed him to an extension.
But they did a franchise tag. They did a franchise tag.
Well, they signed. I think they signed him to an actual extension, not just a franchise. They kept him on the franchise, and then they actually signed him to a deal. I think so. Anyway, he's on the team next season, and I know that. If Anthony Richardson is better than Trevor Lawrence this season, then Trevor Lawrence has failed. He's an actual bust. And that's not to say something bad about Anthony Richardson. That's just to say Anthony Richardson doesn't have any reps yet. Like, and Trevor Lawrence not only has seasons under his belt, but if you remember him in college, coming out of college, people were saying he should sit out that last season of college. Absolutely. Because he's already the number one pick in the following draft. Like, he's like coming out of college, he's like one of 2 like can't miss prospects when we're in the last like 10 or 15 years at the position. So like, if he's the third best quarterback in this division, that would be
the way that I look at it, and why I say that, CJ Stroud did what CJ Stroud did. Okay, that was amazing. The Colts missed the playoffs by 1 game, and Gardner Minshew was the quarterback. I guarantee you, like, there's one more win in there if Anthony Richardson is the quarterback over a Gardner Minshew. So we're looking at a situation where the Colts and the Texans would have been in the playoffs had Anthony Richardson not gotten hurt. And then we're looking at still with Trevor Lawrence, he would have missed the playoffs. So now we're having a conversation. How do you justify that conversation? So if this is going on for a second year and that happens, yes, he will be the third best quarterback in the division. I mean, I don't have an argument against it.
It's certainly possible. I don't know if it's probable. And if that possibility comes true, then yeah, it's time to start over in Jacksonville. Fire the coach, fire the GM, ship Trevor Lawrence off to whoever will give you whatever they'll give for him. Maybe it's the first, maybe it's the second, maybe it's the third. I don't know. It'll be time to start over. That's for sure.
The NFC South is looking like a good destination for a lot of quarterbacks. All right, cool. So let's talk about the draft. What do the Jags need in this draft?
So wait, I think they draft in like pick like early 20s. Is that correct?
I do not know their draft position. That's the truth.
So
Anyway,
I
this
think,
is all hypothetical anyway.
yeah, that's true. So I think they pick like, now I have to find it.
All right. Well, while you're looking that up, I'm just gonna say this. So the Jags, they I just think they weren't a tough team. And as much as I look at their draft board and I say, and I don't see like defensive line, well, defensive line is pushed back, offensive line is pushed back, linebackers being pushed back, safety being pushed back. I think that's more of their issue more than their skill positions, their corner, wide receiver, edge. And I think they have to get tougher. And I think
Mhm.
they got bullied. You know what I mean? That's kind of what I think. But go ahead. I think that's what they
Yeah,
prioritize. Like, let me get defensive linemen, let me get offensive linemen, let me get linebackers, let me get safeties.
I think that so they pick it at 17.
Mm-hmm.
I would agree that there seems to be some kind of like some softness going on with them on that team. I think they could definitely go corner. They just invested so much into the defensive line that I'm not completely sure that that's the best use of resources. I would at 19 I wouldn't be mad at them if there's a tackle coming out of Washington. I think his last name is Fashanu.
Mm-hmm.
I wouldn't be mad at them drafting him to improve the offensive line. They just kind of have like
We got a minute left on this one, just to let you know.
overall they're like just soft, and so they just need to improve their toughness, like you said. It's any one of those kind of positions that improves like sort of the trenches of the team.
Got you. That sounds about right. So we're gonna finish this episode up with the division winning surprise of the NFL team, the Houston Texans, which by the way, once again, CJ, man, I'm sorry about what I said about the draft stuff, man. You know, I didn't know what I was talking about. You see. Uh so so they finished, I wanted to get that right. They finished 10-7, won the AFC South and advanced in the playoffs. What they got to do. So let's talk about what they did this offseason. And also I'm very curious to hear where this is. I'm actually very curious about. This is why I saved them for last. What is their expectation for you after
Yeah.
if they hit on what they got going on?
So I thought that they did exactly what you're supposed to do when you hit on a quarterback who's a rookie and is on a rookie deal. You start to fill out the roster with the highest end talent that you can afford, because this is your moment. This is your chance to actually win a Super Bowl. Like you said, most times, or at least many times, the Super Bowl winning team has a really good quarterback on a rookie deal.
Mm-hmm.
It's sort of like the only cheat code left in football as far as team
Mm-hmm.
building is concerned. So I believe they did a really good job with signing Danielle Hunter to the money that they signed him to. Deniso Archery,
Mm-hmm.
who's another defensive end from Tennessee. I like the flyer that they're taking on Jeff Okudah, cornerback, who was coming from Atlanta, who was drafted by Detroit. Um, you know, I think that they still can use an upgraded wide receiver. I know that they were one of the teams in talks with Cincinnati about T. Higgins. I thought that they should have been. I don't know if they were involved in talks, but they should have been involved in talks with who's a San Diego receiver who was traded to the
Mike
Bears.
Williams. Oh, no.
No, he went to
Keenan
the
Allen.
Jets.
Keenan Allen.
Keenan Allen. I thought they should have been in talks, or at least for Keenan Allen, because he's the kind of receiver who's an upgrade, who does things that their other receivers don't do, and still has a season or two left of high end play, I believe, left in his tank. So, but anyway, I think that they have a young but maturing roster that I think they also didn't they trade for or sign the running back from Cincinnati,
Yeah, Joe Mixon. Yeah.
Joe Mixon. Yeah. So like, yeah, I think that they did very good in free agency, and I think they're right there with all the like the two or three top AFC teams. to contend to get to the Super Bowl.
Okay. So when I look at them, I actually don't think they need another wide receiver. I think they need a guy who complements the two very dynamic wide receivers they have in Nico Collins and Tank Dell. Um, I think if there's a compliment to them or whatever makes them easier, yeah, I think bring that in. But I don't feel as though that's like a pressing need for them. I think when they got Joe Mixon, they looked at that and they said because they still have the guy from Florida, correct? The running back.
He might. I think he's still on the roster. He didn't play well last season. I think Joe Mixon's definitely going to start.
Yes. Okay. So when I looked at it, they had two running backs. I looked at their defense and I said, oh, they re-signed Dalton Schultz too, so they brought him back as another weapon. I looked at their defense and I said, yo, this defense is even playing well. I thought Will Anderson played well. I had questions about him coming out just in terms of like, is he who they think he is? And I think he did. I think he played very well, in my opinion. I still think they needed more there, but I liked what their offseason, their free agency. What I liked is actually they got three cornerbacks. Not to say that all three of them are going to start or anything, but they got depth at the position at worst, and they can kind of look at what they had and everything and kind of say, all right, that's not a pressing need for us. Like they took that kind of off the table to say, all right, even if we didn't hit on anything, we have three. We can put out 3 to 4 cornerbacks and match up accordingly pretty well. Yeah, so I actually kind of liked their free agency. I think they got better from last year going into this year, and I think that makes them very scary.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So tell me what's up with what else do they need in the draft? Then we'll talk about expectations for them.
So I think they don't have a first round pick. I don't believe. So I think they pick pretty early in the second round.
Mm-hmm.
I think they should look at receiver. I think those. There's probably like the top 2 tiers of receivers will be first round picks. I think that next tier, someone like Troy Franklin, Keon Coleman, improve the wide receiver not only talent but depth. I think that's if it's not a hole on their roster, I think it's a place where they can still upgrade both in terms of the ceiling and the floor. So I would focus there. And then just overall, depth at those important positions, like maybe look at defensive end and linebacker, even though they have starters there. People get hurt, players get hurt all the time. And you also want to just start to future-proof your roster, because at some point you're going to be paying C.J. Stroud that top-tier quarterback money. And so you just want to start putting pieces in place so that when you're paying him, you already have sort of young talent to replace the veteran talent that you're going to have to let go or not be able to sign in free agency because you're paying that those high end dollars are going to your quarterback. But I trust CJ Stroud. I think he'll continue to improve. Maybe not. He may not have sort of like the jump in versus expectations that he had as he came into the league. But I think he has the sort of the mentality and the physical attributes to not only play at the level he played last year, but to build upon that. I like DeMeco Ryans as a head coach. I think as far as the defense is concerned, not only do they add talent, I like the way that he has like a strong defensive scheme that takes advantage of the talent and helps to mitigate some of maybe the weaker areas on the roster. So I think they should start to focus on wide receiver and just adding depth overall on the team.
Okay. See, I think where I'm looking at Houston, I'm looking at doubling down on protecting CJ Stroud. For me, like once you get a quarterback, I think your job is to protect him more than give him weapons. And I kind of look to kind of give you a picture of the flip side of that. I think that's where, for instance, like a Cincinnati kind of failed Joe Burrow. They gave him all these weapons, but he's having to win games where he has to get sacked 8, 9 times, in a game. So I think that's worse. Like I would rather have a strong offensive line. So I think if they get a offensive lineman, because I don't think they're going to be able to get another edge rusher. But if they got another offensive lineman, I definitely think Houston is in a situation where they're contenders in the NFL. And I think even like Kansas City or whoever else is in the AFC, Baltimore has to look at them and say, all right, how are we going to beat them?
Yeah, I mean, I think they're definitely in that tier. I mean, we'll see what Kansas City ends up looking like on offense. Having Patrick Mahomes he mitigates all challenges on offense basically. But there's only one Patrick Mahomes. And so the need for wide receiver, in my view, for Houston comes from that idea that like while CJ Stroud is really good, he's not Patrick Mahomes, and so he still needs talent around him in order to succeed. And to continue to succeed as well. Especially because year in year out, what worked last year may not work as well the following season because defenses just adjust and get used to what you're doing and what certain players' strengths and weaknesses are. So but I agree. I'm always in favor of adding talent on the offensive and defensive line because I think those are the positions that raise the floor the most for a team. So like when I see a team at the end of the season that had a lot of high end talent, but they weren't successful. The first places I look are what would it look like on the offensive and defensive lines, and also on the flip side, when a team that doesn't have a lot of skill position talent over succeeds, I look at okay, well they probably had really good offensive and defensive line play. A team like Detroit that doesn't have that high end talent and the skill positions, but their offensive and defensive lines are legit. So I agree with that approach as well.
Yeah. I just think like when it would like Kansas City's coming. You keep that in mind. Kansas City's coming. Chris Jones is there. He's somebody you got to deal with. You know what I mean? So that's kind of where I'm like, all right, if you're gonna kind of beat Kansas City, you're gonna have to neutralize where their strengths are, and that's why I'm saying I'd rather double down there.
I agree. I don't know that like a rookie guard is going to be able to do much with Chris Jones at all. The rookie guard will add depth behind whoever's starting. But in the second, especially where they're picking in the second round,
good point.
Now you only play Chris Jones once, maybe in the season, maybe twice. They're not in division, so maybe you don't build everything around trying to beat the Chiefs. If the idea is stop Chris Jones as best way possible, they should have done that in free agency or a trade and bringing in who's the best guard in the league. Let's trade for him, or who's the second best center in the league. Let's trade for him. That kind of thing.
Not a bad point. That's not a bad point. That's actually a really good point that you just said there. That's actually a pretty good point. 22-year-old may not be able to do nothing with Chris Jones. Period.
Yeah, Chris Jones been here a while, and he's a borderline Hall of Famer. So it's tough to ask somebody fresh off of playing a bowl game to really mess with Chris Jones in any kind of real way.
I got you. So I mean, outside of that, also you still have Baltimore, who led the league in sacks last year, believe it or not. And you know what I mean. So that's what I want to say. But I just think if once you get your quarterback, the best thing you could do for your team is get the quarterback. The thing that you need to do the best is protect that quarterback. And I think once again, Cincinnati failed that. And me being a Colts fan, I watched the Colts fail Andrew Luck with that, not protecting him and giving him so. I like the weapons, but I like the offensive line and making sure.
Look, if their second round pick is ends up being like the best guard or the second best guard in the draft, I wouldn't be mad. If it ended up being or center for that matter, wouldn't be mad. If it's the whatever receiver is left is the best receiver at that position at that spot in the draft, I wouldn't be mad either. They might look at. I mean, there's not a lot of. I'm not the biggest Schultz fan. I think he's kind of just average. He's like he kind of catches the ball and falls down. So I'm not. I don't have that much value in him. So if there's a tight end, sort of in that second, third round range, maybe that's it. Maybe that's the idea that there are some tight ends who are maybe not at the high end in terms of overall talent. But they're more like receivers. They were just big receivers and can be effective starting off. Maybe you take that guard in the second round, and then you take that tight end in the third round, and you've improved, and you are able to improve upon the passing game, both in terms of protection at the guard spot, and in terms of receiving, because you have an upgrade as a receiver over Schultz.
And just understand when we get to Chris Jones, he gonna see double teams all game. And it's
Yeah, you just
about him.
you game plan for Chris Jones. I don't know that you can draft to stop Chris Jones. Similar to any great player, you come up, and that's the beauty of the playoffs. Like teams can run off strong runs in the regular season, but they didn't play that one team in the playoffs that has that one player that can take advantage of that one weakness that they have, and so that happens.
Got you. All right, this has been crazy. I told you was the man for the job. First of all, when I talked to you on the phone, I told you was the man for the job. You see?
Listen.
This is what
I did. This is what I did just now. I was the floor raiser for the AFC and NFC South. Okay. I couldn't come with the high end, like this is going to be the greatest. These are the greatest two divisions in football. But I explained why they'll be credible. And that's credibility is very important in this day and age.
You the offensive line, baby, and not the wide receivers. That's what we're talking about right now. You see what I'm saying? They can't listen. They can't fuck with us now. They can't fuck with us now.
A strong offensive line, you can't win without one. I'll tell you this: you can't win the Super Bowl without a strong offensive line.
That's a fact. That is a fact.
I don't care. Even Kansas City, that offensive line in that Super Bowl, they played well.
They ain't the only one they lost is when they didn't have an offensive line.
Yeah, exactly. There you go.
So that I ain't messing with you. So once again, Mooch, I appreciate you coming on. As always, we are excited to have you in for season 4, cause you don't know football. So for everybody who don't know, if you was living under a rock and you didn't know, you can catch us on Spotify, YouTube for the full clips. You catch us on Instagram, Facebook, TikTok. We all over the place. And Mooch, man, listen, you just came in, you just did your thing with the AFC South and the NFC South. And I still got to look at you and tell you, where the camera, let me see. Because you don't know football. Thanks again, man, for always coming on, man.
No doubt, for sure.
We'll talk to you soon.